Greetings. On October 15th, 2020, the NADA community held its first virtual meeting titled Innovations in Healing with the NADA Protocol. The presentations featured the Southwest region of the United States. The meeting was 5 hours in duration live, but the complete recording of sessions is 2.5 hours long. The first panel is Barefoot Acupuncture Movement, Resilience Building as Resistance to Injustice, Racism, and Violence. The speaker is Ryan Bemis. The second panel is NADA for First Responders Experiencing Trauma. The speakers are Stephanie Sarnosky and Heidi Young-Blackgoat. The third panel is NADA supporting Native American health, wellness, and community, and the speakers are Albino Garcia Jr. and Phyllis Spears. And the fourth and last panel is on NADA in criminal justice settings. This was our largest panel with 4 speakers, Sophia Chavez, Rachel Fryer, Sean Taylor, and Erica Vigiano. We hope you are as inspired and moved by these presentations as we were. If you have any feedback, please contact us at nadaoffice@acudetox.com. Thank you.
The Baptists gathered behind an El Paso Walmart to sing the Jesus, Jesus, Jesus songs and speak about light and dark and light candles swiftly blown out by the hot desert wind of early August. Mourning family limps to the middle of the hands raised believers. We pray you end racism, Lord. I question their authenticity until a smiling boy walks up to me, offers hug. Then a crying boy walks up to me, offers hug, clings to my shoulder blade. I wander across the street to where a white man drove across Texas to terrorize the border and everybody south, inspired by the leader of the free world. A mile from the Free Bridge, a memorial has sprung up of flowers and crosses and names and flags for the 22 executed at the Mega Mall, overlooking the sprawling lights of Juarez, right over a parking lot full of cars that couldn't escape. Regional produce trucks still docked at the ports. I hear a roiling all of a sudden. I turn, startled by a man exploding into a tantrum. I shudder away. He hides some object in his hands, but I remain distant. And the people step to the rage. They form a circle around him. He shrieks. A boy offers him a hug. And one by one, the people step to the center, a spontaneous group hug of strangers until all I hear is a whimper, his whimper sinking into their arms to the pavement still burning from the day of fire. But my paranoia persists. What is in his hands? Finally, I see something. A clamshell, an eagle feather, a sage stick. My brother. So right there, we offered NADA between the Billy Graham bus and Hooters. How did I end up here? Through people like you at conferences like this, hearing your passion to help people help the people, you all seeking community. I remember meeting at a conference, our board president, Ken Carter, sharing his story with me about how NADA went down in South Carolina and how acupuncturists killed the work of NADA activists, bringing NADA into prisons and helping people get off pain pills. He told me he started training preachers in the South how to do NADA in churches. I was like, for real? So when someone asked me how I ended up teaching nuns and evangelical worship leaders how to do acupuncture after church, for migrants camping in the street, and the 90,000 treatments that they've been able to do in a decade, I tell them how powerful the NADA movement is. And that's how our project, Crossroads Acupuncture, which now our name is Barefoot Acupuncture Movement, came about. And since that shooting a year ago, we've been visiting villages and partnering with communities down in Central America, from which the majority of almost 70,000 refugees have migrated north to seek asylum at the border, at the Rio Grande, just a few miles from that same Walmart where the shooting was. They share their stories of begging their husbands not to migrate north, of their work to rebuild the social fabric so people don't have to leave. And these types of encounters have confirmed for us something we all know about NADA, that even the most marginalized and underserved communities can use acupuncture to build resilience in response to violence, poverty, and injustice. It's about partnership with people, giving them this NADA tool of nonviolence to care for their community. It's about accompaniment as they take control of their healthcare, as they become nonviolent agents of change. And that, I argue, is the true spirit of NADA, nonviolence. Martin Luther King Jr. said, it's not enough just to use nonviolence as a tool to pull out when it's convenient or heroic. It's about changing yourself and how you approach the world. What he was talking about, that's the spirit of NADA. So let's dive into that. What do we mean by NADA nonviolence? How do we relate to the people not as victims or recipients of aid, but rather as agents of their own process of change? And look at some real world examples of nonviolent resistance in action with two of our barefoot collective teachers, Megan and Nancy. And most importantly, we'll talk about how you can be a part of resilience building at this existential moment in history. So first off, what is nonviolence? So for Gandhi, it wasn't enough just to speak out against violence, to be against violence. You got to root out violence through love. And the term he used was this Sanskrit word satyagraha, which means holding to the truth or truth force, the force of love. Recovering from addiction. See, that's an experience of satyagraha, of that deeper truth, of telling the truth. It's about a man like this shot in the head by a stray bullet in Juarez, him finding that inner resilience to walk again. So putting needles in so people can get in touch with that inner peace, that is the tool that we have to love people. And the intentional holding space we offer for hurt people to heal so they don't hurt other people. One man we worked with was a health worker in Juarez. He was kidnapped twice. His entire community came together to put up 2 ransoms. And the second time, his captors dumped him out on the busiest road in Juarez, bound, bleeding, gagged, blindfolded. And the people walked by him all day long, afraid to approach, until one of his patients recognized him, untied him. So it's about supporting him to tap into his resiliency, to be able to continue on to this day, working in that same place from where he was kidnapped, in spite of the lingering fear of being kidnapped again, for him to keep helping others in community. Now, a big part of nonviolence for me is knowing my weaknesses, my limits, my shortcomings. And working in Juarez has brought me very intimately connected with my faulties, my shortcomings, my weaknesses. But it's also brought me into partnership with people who have strengths that I don't have. People like Nancy Gonzalez, our NADA trainer in Juarez. So I want to invite Nancy on to share a little bit about her experience in the border city of Juarez. Nancy, ¿estás ahí?
Ya se pudo.
Nancy, bienvenidos. Welcome, Nancy.
Gracias.
Adelante.
Sí, el modelo NADA en mi comunidad llegó en un momento pues muy crítico.
The NADA
Atravesábamos
model
una época
the NATA model came to them at a very important moment in their history.
Atravesamos una época de violencia con unos niveles de asesinatos muy altos.
We
Esto a
were going through a
consecuencia de la
period with a
lucha,
lot of murders, a lot of high murder rates.
a consecuencia de la lucha entre los cárteles de la droga. Y pues es triste saber que todos los que vimos en Ciudad Juárez, en algún momento vimos cómo asesinaron a alguien
And
o
so
por las
a lot
calles.
of the violence came about from drug trafficking. And so there's a lot of people in their city that have been victims of violence, have committed acts of violence, and this is a part of what we have to deal with.
O llegamos a ver también por las calles los cuerpos de las personas que asesinaban, incluso cuando no tenían nada que ver con esta guerra.
So and
Eh,
sometimes there would be there's bodies that you see on the streets, on the side of the road, even people who weren't involved in drug trafficking.
pues ante estas situaciones nosotros no podíamos quedarnos solo como observadores. Como laicos comprometidos, tenemos un llamado a ser agentes de cambio.
So we didn't just want to be observers through all this. We wanted to be agents of change.
A buscar la forma de ayudar a nuestros hermanos, pues en la medida de nuestras posibilidades. Por eso cuando llegó el modelo NADA, fue como una pequeña luz que nos ayudó a encontrar un camino de cómo poder acompañar a las personas que estaban sufriendo este tipo de situaciones, ya sea de manera directa o indirecta.
So when the NATA model came to us, it gave us a way to be with people, to work with people affected by all this.
Por ejemplo, tuvimos el caso de una mujer que afuera de su casa de una manera muy cruel asesinaron a su hijo cuando él ni siquiera estaba involucrado en este tipo de problemas.
One
Y
example
pues
was a woman we worked with who witnessed a killing right outside of her home, and this really was really affecting her.
y pues sabemos que la pérdida de un hijo jamás se va a olvidar, pero esta mujer acudía con nosotros y le ofrecíamos la terapia y podía encontrar un momento para llorar, si así lo deseaba, para estar tranquila, para descansar.
She came to them in a moment of crisis after this had happened, and they sat her down and put Nada in, and she was able to cry, and they were able to be there with her.
Y pues todo esto sin ser juzgada, sin ser criticada por expresar sus emociones. Y poco a poco, con estos recursos y pues la ayuda de Dios, ella fue encontrando esa fortaleza interna para seguir adelante con su vida, aún con todo el dolor que ella tenía.
So little by little, she started to be able to express her emotions more, and be able to continue to progress and to find that inner peace and that strength to keep going on.
Y así como a ella la hemos podido acompañar a otras personas que se han sabido sobreponer a las adversidades que se les van presentando.
So we've
Y
been able
por
to work with a
eso,
lot of other people like that and help their resilience to keep moving forward.
por eso el contar con el modelo NADA, pues para nosotros es de gran ayuda, porque pues sabemos que NADA crea esos espacios de paz y en nuestra ciudad, pues es lo que más necesitamos.
So it's been really great to have this NATA model because we've been able to create little places of peace in our city.
Gracias.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much, Nancy. So with the barefoot acupuncture movement, we measure our impact on how acupuncture is helping the community, supporting people like Nancy and their ability to challenge the narrative that Juarez is a violent place full of violent people, and helping them become more resilient to this label that they carry as the murder capital of the world. Right before I went to acupuncture school, I got a chance to visit Nada, India. And there, unexpectedly, got to hear the Dalai Lama speak. He said something I'll never forget. He said, if we are not working for the enlightenment of everyone, and it's just in for the enlightenment of ourselves, then that is not true enlightenment. And so for me, this is to the heart of what nonviolent resistance is all about, and what sets NADA apart from other types of healthcare models. And one of my students who has exemplified the most this is a woman named Beatrice, who lives in a small town in Mexico where 90% of our neighbors are dead or disappeared or have fled. And so she's offering NADA for people there who have no choice but to stay. She didn't have any prior medical training or education around medicine or before this. And there's a lot of other mental health or medical services out there. But women like Nancy and Beatrice, together we've started an acupuncture school with the Catholic Diocese of Juarez called Barefoot Health Promoters. And NADA is foundational for this entire curriculum. Why NADA? Because we have a global movement of resilience building. Because they get to be a part of something bigger than their own efforts. And what you do strengthens what they do. And for 50 years, us in NADA, we've been experimenting with this protocol in a variety of places and peoples and ailments. And through this process of sharing what works and what doesn't work, we've learned some best practices. We know when there's a relationship of dependency or oppression, and when there's a relationship of liberation, freedom. And Megan Yarberry is one of the NADA trainers who has helped me to understand this difference and to be able to discern that on a case-by-case basis. I came to a conference, about a decade ago, and heard about Megan Yarberry and her story and how a handful of refugees learned how to do NADA and how they used that during an armed conflict, during a civil war in Uganda. My internet just kind of went out. Is everybody able to hear me still? Able to hear me?
Yep, still hearing you.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. So I'm listening to Megan at this conference, and I just walked up to her and asked her how she did what she did. And she shared with me her recipe, which is the same model that Nancy and I use. And so I want to invite her now to share about how she has seen NADA as a form of resistance, as a form of nonviolent resistance in her work. Megan, are you there? Megan.
Okay, I've got two devices going on here and I'm fumbling around with, so thanks for your patience. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you, Megan.
Okay, excellent. Thanks so much. Yeah, so when I started acupuncture school, I was really drawn to the image of becoming a barefoot acupuncturist and sort of wandering the landscape and providing what I saw as a super efficacious and inexpensive health modality. And eventually I began doing projects internationally. And as Ryan has said, doing this work in settings where there are marginalized communities, where there's been conflict, it's really humbling to see the strength, resilience, the passion, the commitment of these local community members, and especially those people that sort of rise to the surface and lend themselves to the healing of the community. So we were doing a training at a UNHCR camp in Uganda, and during that period, we did some trainings, some peripheral trainings with, for example, some Catholic nuns and some other healthcare workers in the area. And one of the trainees in these peripheral trainings was a nurse at a rural health clinic. And in this area, there was a history of intertribal and intervillage disputes, largely around land usage. And a few months after the training, after she had received her NADA certificate and had been practicing for a little while, there was a land dispute among two villages near where she was posted. And the dispute was made up of like cattle raids, and eventually it escalated to where there was violence being done. People had their huts burned down, including one woman who lost her child when her house burned down. And as a result, there was a lot of resentment. There was intention to retaliate. There was grief. There was hopelessness. And so the nurse went to the village and offered to provide NADA for the community and to those people who had lost property or even lives. And she reported back to us that after providing these treatments, she really started to see a shift within that community where people were starting to let go of their anger, to find non-conflict ways to resolve issues, and regained a sense of hope to see their way forward. That was a really striking example, but time after time, when we've gone into communities, we've seen that the empowerment of the locals to provide this sort of very democratic, with a small d, health access was both empowering for those people who we trained, but also helped to elevate the entire community and bring it into a sense of balance and bring a renewed sense of peace and intention around building health in the community. So thanks for letting me share, Ryan, and great work.
So we can see that the spirit of NADA is a method of nonviolence, and it's part of a diverse, rich, global, grounded movement that helps build communities up. How can you be a part of this? How can we help you grow into becoming part of something greater than your own efforts? How can you get this tool into the hands of the people who can help the people? Because at the end of the day, nonviolence is not just about making violence obsolete. It's also about not cooperating with systems of injustice. Refusing to be an agent of violence at all levels. And with NADA, we are in non-cooperation with the status quo of how acupuncture is done, advocating for laws for a more diverse acupuncture workforce around the world. And this allows us to not cooperate with a pharmaceutical-based healthcare system rooted in greed and facets of structural violence and racism. There's a lot of ways to do acupuncture. There's the boutique model, creating a spa for the rich. There's the missionary model, going out to treat the poor. Both, I argue, are mere extensions of capitalism and colonialism. And NADA can be used in either of these settings. There's nothing wrong with that. What sets us apart is our approach of resilience building. In the words that Ken Carter told me, that's our game. And maybe you can't go with us to Africa or Latin America on one of our immersion programs, but maybe there's something you can do in your own community right now, in the year ahead and the months ahead, as we kind of navigate into uncharted territory in this country. Check out these 198 examples of nonviolent resistance on the Albert Einstein Institute website. You know, how many of these can NATA not be a part of, that NATA couldn't help? For example, students of ours have been doing NATA in Minneapolis at the George Floyd protests, and just in the past 2 weeks during the riots in Louisville. We can add 2 more things to this list of methods of nonviolent action: treating people with NATA and training communities how to do NATA on their own, helping them to create little safe spaces around their communities in these markets, like this market in Nicaragua, creating safe spaces for people to come and sit and meditate or just be. Like Wasim, a
Ryan,
Palestinian
I'm so
refugee.
sorry to interrupt you. I just want to let you know we're at time.
Okay.
Are you close?
Yeah, just a few minutes. So yeah. All right. So like Wasim, this Palestinian refugee doing NATA last summer at a tent next to the explosion in Lebanon, and his efforts to train his community there how to do NATA. And so as a nonprofit, your donations help us make this dream possible. And if you donate $100 or more, I put in the chat a link to our website. You get a free copy of Acid West by Joshua Wheeler, in which he writes about our project in Mexico. Acupuncture is by and large an underutilized tool in humanitarian aid. The barefoot acupuncture movement is working to change that. The potential is limitless. Partnerships with micro lending programs, community development projects. What if every disaster relief organization had their own NATA trainers, their own barefoot clinics? Imagine what's possible. If you want to become a NATA trainer, if you want to start up a humanitarian aid project, we have webinars and mentorship to guide you. You don't have to have any experience as a teacher. We'll help you grow. So we invite you to go to our website and apply to be a part of our Barefoot Collective. Megan and I got a webinar coming up on the 20th of November to unpack all the baggage that comes along with the missionary mindset. We're going to open up and share about how we have rooted out this in ourselves and how we can create authentic partnerships with the poor. And if you sign up in the next week through our website, you can register for free. We need volunteers most of all. One of our volunteers was Arlo Starr, who passed away a few years ago. He was a NATA trainer and one of our most beloved teachers in Juarez. He would leave his home at Albuquerque at 5 a.m., travel the 10-hour round trip to Juarez, getting back at midnight. What we need is a whole bunch of trainers and acupuncturists like NATA, someone who spent his last day on earth training people on the Navajo reservation how to do NATA, supporting their resilience. And the more students I train out there, the more people out there are going to keep me in community and solidarity. Because you see the Sunday after that El Paso shooting, I woke up very depressed, cynical, unmotivated. I look at my phone and there's calls and texts from the local NATA community. What are we going to do about this? So they got me out of bed to that Baptist vigil. They got me out on the streets. They showed me I'm capable of more. They helped me tap into my own resilience. And as the world keeps getting tough, we need more people in the spirit of NATA. So I put my contact information, our website in the chat there, and I really do hope to hear from you.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you all for being here. I'm sorry that I came in a little bit late. I'm actually at clinicals in the OB unit out here in Tuba City. So just to start off, Stephanie and I wanted to open with a land acknowledgement. For those of you who are unfamiliar with this, it is a recognition of the indigenous people who've been the original stewards of this land since time immemorial and understands the particular colonial history they have endured and continue to endure. It allows us to sit in gratitude for their relationships with the land as well as our own, and hopefully encourage you to interrogate how you participate in the continued erasure of Indigenous folks and sovereignty and rights and your efforts at decolonization. So I'm logging in from the original homelands of the Diné, the Hopi, Pueblos, Southern Paiute, and Ute. And as I said, I'm doing clinicals today here. So I'm in Tuba City, which is on the Navajo Nation.
And I'm in Flagstaff, also known as Kinlani, and I am standing on the land of the Hohokam, Hopi, Pueblos, and Western Apache.
All right, next slide, please.
Okay, so I'm just going to briefly introduce myself. My name is Stephanie Chikuti Sarnowski. I'm in the middle of a name change. I am a licensed acupuncturist in Arizona, pronouns they, them, or she, her. I have been working with the Arizona NADA Advocacy Committee for the past 2 years to help support the broadening of scope for ADS providers. We have been working diligently. We also helped put together this meeting, but we have been working diligently with the Arizona Acupuncture Board with an effort to broaden the scope so that trauma is included, because currently substance abuse uh, is the only thing within the scope of an ADS in Arizona. We're very close when COVID hit to really helping to broaden that scope. I founded and I'm the acupuncturist at Stock Community Acupuncture, which is a nonprofit community acupuncture clinic in Flagstaff, Arizona. And because the scope had not been broadened yet, I was the person providing the NADA treatments for first responders in the acupuncture clinic.
And yeah, Deb, my name is Heidi Young Blackcoat. I am a nurse and also a student nurse midwife and women's health nurse practitioner. I've been a nurse for almost 10 years. I started out in the ER. I was specifically a trauma resuscitation nurse for 3 years at a level 1 trauma center that covers the northern Arizona region and extends into some other tribal lands. I have been a float nurse in the women's infant cluster at my hospital, as well as a part-time critical care flight nurse in Northern Arizona. And I'm now very part-time in the NICU while still flying some, but also focusing on my master's program. So I'm a dedicated night shifter. I've been a night shifter all these years. And that's important to me to tell you all, because the resources that are available in day shift are often not the same for night shifters. So being in trauma, having difficult cases, having the team, feel the impact of these difficult cases. The expectation was that we'd wake up during the time that we normally sleep to come back for a debrief. And you can imagine sleep is often the thing that we truly need at that time. And so that's something I have also advocated for. I had a series of neonatal and pediatric deaths that encouraged me to go to EAP. And for those of you who don't know what that is, it's Employee Assistance Program at our hospital. It's like the free counseling. You get like six sessions with a mental health provider. And a lot of my peers, I noticed, didn't want to use that. And so I sort of used my experience and how it helped me to spread that word. And still there was resistance. And I think some of that is kind of the bravado of ER nursing and paramedicine and EMTs. And it's not, doesn't align to gender, but just that we'd suck it up and continue on and, be ready for the next thing that comes through the trauma doors and not really work through some of that secondary trauma and things that we absorb. I've been a strong advocator and supporter of community partnerships, especially with local solutions. I think communities have the answers that they know they need. And as a health provider, we need to listen to that. And I've also been a community member. So I think walking both sides of that, I can see the benefit of these partnerships. And I have done a few things for communal health in my town. And within the last 2 years, I also joined the ethics committee at my hospital. And we talk about things like moral distress and how that kind of impacts what we're going to be talking about today. Next slide. So in terms of the partnership, as a staff member at FMC, I identified Stephanie as a great resource for us with her community acupuncture organization. And the ER at that time had some like slush funds. And I just reached out. The worst case they could have said was no, and just asked if we could have $1,000 to use for this program. And they were happy to give that. And then we expanded it through the evidence-based practice fund at the hospital to the EMTs and paramedics at Guardian Medical Transport, which is the EMS providers in our town.
After that, because COVID hit, we also, I sought out other grants and expanded it to include all hospital workers. And through the Arizona Community Foundation, it was a very small grant. Some of it was for just so we could open the clinic back up with PPE and all those sorts of things. But because though nurses and first responders are often highlighted and doctors as on the front lines, especially during the pandemic, we wanted to acknowledge that everyone working at the hospital, from the janitorial staff to the cafeteria workers to to the radiologists that have to be in a space, a medical space during a pandemic, we're going to be experiencing aspects of secondary trauma. I would also like to add to Heidi's list of accomplishments that she is also on the board of directors of Stuck. So we were lucky enough to have her, and she is technically one of my bosses. And we are very, very lucky to have her because she came up with this project. She reached out to me, and I thought it was a really innovative way to use NADA, because as an acupuncturist, I have been using NADA for trauma because I'm allowed to use it for whatever I want as a licensed acupuncturist. And it really just fit into what we were trying to do with the AZ Arizona group, advocacy group. And it was really a brilliant idea. And I just want to give her some kudos for, she's always thinking of new amazing things. So
next slide, please. So in terms of how the inception of the project idea came about, it really was from a personal experience when I was working in the ER, and gratefully, thankfully, I had already had an established relationship with Stephanie. I think a lot of healthcare providers like to forget that they're individuals and humans first, and can't really separate all the identities that they live amongst when they go to work. And it's sometimes easy to like dissociate, you know, my home work self from everything else. And sometimes we're caught off guard. And for me personally, I was completely caught off guard by this particular case, and triggered by, generally speaking, a human trafficking case, which I had done a lot of training to identify victims of human trafficking, but never had experienced it, you know, firsthand. And I happened to be covering some area for lunch where a patient came in. And thankfully, you know, like I had the right assessment skills to identify this. And for those of you who may or may not have been following the murdered and missing Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people, this was something that hit home for me in a way that, you know, other providers wouldn't have had. Sorry, it makes me very emotional. I was severely triggered to the point where when I left my night shift at 3 a.m., I felt very unsafe. And my peers knew something was wrong, but they couldn't really understand it because they're not an Indigenous woman themselves. So I went home, I did the best I could, and, you know, like tried to rationalize the emotions, like, you're safe, you did the right thing, it was good that you were there, this person is in a safer place now. And I knew I needed sleep, and when I went home, woke up, I just knew I needed to call. So I was absolutely in that, you know, flight freeze state. And you know, I've done a lot of other outlets that are healthy. I don't think I have, you know, like I don't go to the bar when we get off work. There's certain things that I know that would be destructive for me that I don't do. And so I just up and said, you know, like I need to see you. And so thankfully, you know, we don't have to talk in the NADA appointments. We can just say the minimal that we need to say, and she gets it. She has a shorthand, which is so gracious. She's so humble with her expertise, and it absolutely calmed me. It absolutely helped me sleep better the next few nights. I got unstuck and felt safer when I left. And so while I think that my experience was very dramatic in terms of that acute phase, it's not uncommon to see my friends go through it, and it might just look differently, and maybe their feeling is exactly the same. And they didn't want to use counseling, and you know, they try other things, and this was just another solution I felt like we could offer. And I think a lot of the like, suck it up and get back to work, we end up dissociating from the feelings and never really have time to work through it, and things build. And from some of the stories that I heard from friends, they were caught off guard when they saw Stephanie because all these emotions came up that they just didn't even know they had. And I would also say Stephanie is very supportive of the BIPOC community. And as an Indigenous woman in a predominantly white ER, I walk a fine line of like advocating for my patients, but also part of my trauma is witnessing people of color be mistreated by their white providers, and me myself being condescended by white providers. And what does that mean? So next slide.
Thank you, Heidi, for sharing that. I know that that was brought up a lot of really strong feelings, and next time I'll see you, I'll do some nada. Okay. Because that's how I deal with things. I poke people. So we're talking a little bit more about the project overview and positive outcomes that we saw. Many people sorry, I'm on the wrong, I'm looking at my slides and that side, so I have to get on the right thing. Many folks from the ER and from the paramedic community continued treatments as a form of continual self-care, even after the grant money was out, which is what Heidi, came in really hoping for. We originally, she originally said, hey, so 3 treatments for every, because, when you have any money that you're spending from, a grant or anything, they want numbers. So we gave everyone 3 treatments per traumatic event because that's what I wanted to see. But I was given leeway to say, you know what, keep coming if it was more continuous trauma. What was great was that unexpected folks attended who, Heidi shared she was surprised, and other, they even shared that they were surprised that they wanted to come. Folks, of course, saw improved sleep and all of the things that you see with continuous NADA treatments. But I think what it brought an awareness to was a need in the healthcare industry that, as Heidi said, and I have to know this about myself as being a member of the healthcare community, that I'm a person too, and humans are people, employees are humans too, and that it's impossible to witness repeated trauma without it impacting you psychologically, without it impacting your nervous system, and without you bringing it home, even if you're unaware that you are, and carrying it around with you. A lot of the information that we gained said that a lot of the nurses, a lot of the ER staff, a lot of the paramedics appreciated the collective care experience. Though I think it did make some folks who are used to being in positions of power in healthcare have to be in a vulnerable place. And Heidi can speak to that more effectively. But it did absolutely create a collective care experience where they had to be in a position of vulnerability. They had to admit that they couldn't handle it all, especially once the pandemic hit. There were a lot more tears. And, anybody who's been in a treatment room where folks are receiving NADA know that tears happen. Emotions are brought up. You either fall asleep or you start crying, and it's not uncommon. And so it can make you feel vulnerable. So having to share a collective space with people that may have been their patients, because it was just during my regular hours. So I was treating other things. And during that period of time, I was treating 11 to 14 folks an hour. So it was really amazing. Heidi, you wanted to talk about that last bullet point.
Yeah, just really quickly. I think this idea of being in circle, all getting treatment, and having this, I don't think my peers could name it, but I felt it very strongly that it's a non-hierarchical space. Stephanie is like, I'm here because I'm trained to do this, but I'm gonna like help your body help itself. And I think there's a false sense of power that we have in our, Western medicine training of like, I'm a nurse, I'm a doctor, I'm an NP, I have the knowledge that you need, not really knowing and creating the space that patients know their bodies best, right? And we need to prioritize shared decision making. And maybe we don't know everything that we think we know. And being next to potentially a patient that we've taken care of in the ER really undoes this in a way that I think, again, people can't name. I definitely felt it. And I think that's absolutely part of the healing too. So just briefly, we want to pull out some of the optional survey comments that people added. Again, it tends to, I was sleeping better. I didn't have nightmares. I have been sleeping soundly, unlike when I'm normally at work. It's like vacation sleep. 8 hours plus is pretty uncommon to get when you're on night shift, especially if you have families. So this, I think, was a great testament to the healing. And this person was one of the ones that Stephanie invited back for extra visits because he was in a different space than other people. The third comment here is that she had not realized how tense she'd been. And lastly, this person felt really cared for. And I think, again, like Stephanie is so welcoming and that space is so welcoming. And they were like, that struck them.
This is a paramedic who is a flight RN paramedic who, when I started treating him, his work was working, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you know more about this human than I do, because you work with him. But he was flying folks with COVID on helicopters to FMC. And this was, right when it started, and it was very much so, there wasn't sure, we weren't sure what was going on with COVID. As everyone knows, we weren't exactly sure it was transmitted. There wasn't enough research, and PPE was scarce, and he was working out on the Navajo reservation. So what he says is, I'm just going to read this to you all. I've had acupuncture before when I was a kid. It was for trauma and stress, and it worked. And I'm just going to briefly, because I want to get to the videos, but the thing that I wanted to highlight about this was that he was very nervous and skeptical when he came in, and had a lot of questions, which I answered afterwards. Some of them I couldn't answer because, we don't know everything. But what he saw was that the last time he came, which was just recently, was that he knew 4 out of 6 people in the room, because now I only have 6 chairs post-COVID. And that it felt really good that he just randomly came to a space and multiple people in the community were there and he knew them. And though they didn't talk, it felt good. It felt like a healing circle. So yes, sorry, Heidi just posted that in the chat, and I agree, we probably won't have time for questions. So I don't know, it was just really wonderful to see the shift. It was really wonderful to see folks who were skeptical and who didn't even think they need help, or the first couple times were pretty nervous and had their eyes open, and he was one of them, finally fall asleep. Finally fall asleep and finally, feel that nervous system reset, so that they could go back and continue their jobs. And I think that was part of this, is that there's a high burnout rate. And that's where, in ER, in all of these areas, there's a high burnout rate, and that we want to try to prevent that. We want to keep our healthcare practitioners compassionate, but also we want to keep them okay enough to continue on with their jobs. Oh. So next slide, this is a testimonial that, Heidi, did you want to introduce?
Yes, so this is Jen. She's been a charge ER nurse all the time that I've been in the ER at Flagstaff Medical Center. She previously had worked in urban setting in Chicago, and she would tell you if she was here that she is not good about taking care of herself.
I don't hear any sound.
Can you hear it now?
Charge nurse in the emergency room for
Yes.
8. I've also worked
Maybe a
in
little louder.
Chicago as well in the ER. Were you initially open to acupuncture prior to ER staff NADA program? I was. I had just never done it because it seemed like a sort of superfluous or luxurious thing to do for yourself. And that's not really my speed. I just thought that was, the price point for private acupuncture was sometimes a little bit off-putting for me. But I didn't have any negative feelings towards it prior to this program. Did you come for a specific work issue, incident, or secondary trauma? I don't think that I so much had a specific incident or trauma, more rather a collective of micro traumas over the years that have affected my sleep pattern, even some like the content of my dreams. And I noticed that I would get off work. I work nights. I would get off work, go home and pass out quite immediately, but then I would be awake 2 to 3 hours later if I was lucky. And then I would be fairly exhausted for that next night shift. I also had, when I was off, I would either be passed out asleep at 7:30 at night on the couch and then wide awake at 11 o'clock at night, or I just didn't have a normal good chunk of sleep, to the point where I would use, melatonin and things like that to try to aid with my sleep. I also did have some, stress-related dreams / nightmares, if you want to call them that, terrible things happening to your children, which wasn't something that I had had before. I mean, we all have regular stress-related dreams, but this was very specific for the probably 6 to 8 months before this program started. And then I would get posterior headaches, kind of the back of my head and down in my shoulders. So that was another thing that I had as well. How did your mind and body feel immediately after your NADA treatment and in the next few days after? I think the first time I didn't feel a whole lot. I felt energized, but relaxed at the same time when I left. The second time I noticed some, I guess you could describe it as numbness or tingling in my fingers and my feet. And then the third time is when I really had to started seeing kind of like a color type aura when I had my eyes closed, and felt kind of floaty in my extremities, and also felt like I had like a weight on my chest, not a bad weight, but like a weighted blanket type of weight on my torso at the same time. And that was the third treatment in. And then after that, I did notice that same type of situation during the treatment. And then after this, my sleep for the few days after would definitely be impacted in a positive way, whether it meant I would sleep longer or later or non-interrupted. And then I was more able to have an appropriate time to go to sleep and time to wake up after that. I did notice a relief of, not a complete cure, but a relief of the posterior headaches that go into my shoulders. That's kind of stress-related headaches. At least that's what I always called them. I don't know if that's what they were. So those I noted, and the effects they were cumulative. So after the treatments, I did notice them becoming stronger as the consecutive treatments went on. Would increased accessibility to this treatment modality help you stay in the position longer, enable greater job satisfaction, balance stressors, and mediate burnout? I do think so. I think having a regular healthy outlet that's not just the gym or, a bottle of wine or going out after work for breakfast with your coworkers, all good things, but I don't think that those can be the one thing alone. I think being in that room, especially at Stuck with all those other people, you have to really focus yourself to not focus on anything. So I think that was a good exercise in slowing my mind and kind of bringing down that stress level, because at our job, especially in the emergency room, especially as a charge nurse, you're always waiting for the other shoe to drop. You're always waiting for the next super sick patient to come in, or always waiting for something to happen that you need to react to. So I do think that spending that time forcing myself to relax and focus on me instead of waiting for something else to happen is very helpful, and would definitely increase my resilience, my job satisfaction, and help mediate burnout. Anything else you would like to share? I do think that the climate at Stuck at first was a little intimidating for me, having the big room with people in it, while this is happening. But Stephanie was extraordinarily kind and very therapeutic. She wasn't condescending, but she was caring. And I think that getting people over that hump of not being in a room by yourself when this happens you still have complete and utter privacy. I never felt like that was a problem. I think that is actually really good for people like us that would almost maybe have a hard time sitting in a four-walled room by ourselves and having to focus on ourselves with no external stimuli. So I think this was almost better for an emergency type worker where you have to not think about the 4 or 5 other chairs in the room or the sound and just really focus on your breathing, focus on the white noise, focus on your heartbeat, focus on what you're feeling in the moment. So I think that was really good, and I hope that it becomes more of a thing for people.
Stephanie, do you have a sense of how much
Like that
longer
fire
the
EMS
video
emergency.
is? Just
This is her last question, but we were thinking we would just pause it and then skip. We're gonna skip the next video, just
okay.
for time's sake. So apologies. We think we went a little bit over. So I think that it's freezing. So I think that we can skip to the
Last
next
slide.
in that last slide, the second from last slide. So what we're skipping just really quickly is just a video of someone who's why we were going to show these is because Jen is a very she's been an ER nurse, charge nurse for a very long time, and then the other gentleman was more of a new one, and just kind of seeing the difference in how the treatment impacted them, and what was going on. So go ahead and skip that video, Anne Marie. And just skip to the slide that says lessons learned. And while we're finding it, Heidi and I can start kind of talking about it. You just won't have a visual just for, so we learned, I feel like Heidi and I learned a lot through this experience. We learned that it was harder to get folks there than we anticipated. And a lot of that I think was a lot of distrust of something that wasn't Western based, since they were Western practitioners. We were both very excited about the unification, because I think sometimes Western medicine and Eastern medicine or any alternative meditation, any alternative form of healing tends to be looked at with distrust by the Western medical community. And I believe that this unified that and really softened it so that we could really find a place where we realize that there's benefits to all medicine, and all medicine has a place in our communities and is essential for our struggle and survival. And it isn't a competition-based situation. Heidi, do you want to go into the rest?
Yeah, I think Stephanie and I are joking, like, who heals the healer? And I think caregivers, especially in the ER and paramedicine, EMT, emergency services, don't always attend to themselves, and they feel bad. And so one of the first people who came to me to thank me for the fund said, I went, it was so great, but I don't want to take money from anybody else. I'm going to use my HSA card. And Stephanie was like, you should use this. And we understand like his intent, but that feeling of like, I shouldn't go spend money, or like Jen, I don't feel like I should spend a lot of money on myself, is a barrier that we're going to constantly confront.
And that's why when we're talking about lessons learned, like I really think that if it's available as a support for healthcare practitioners, and my hope is that what we can do is that it's not me providing the treatment, and it's where this goes along with the next slide, but it's not me providing the treatment. It's about, if we can expand the scope of ADS folks in Arizona, then we can provide it more, we can spread this out, and it can become a thing that even like might be provided in the hospital by some nurses that are trained, or things like that, where they don't have to come to the clinic, that they have more. Which is why we're really passionate about broadening the scope, because there is such a connection between substance abuse and trauma. There is such a connection between, I can't tell you how many nurses came in and said, hey, and I'm, they didn't put this in their survey responses, but they did tell me individually, like, hey, like, especially since the pandemic hit, that nightly, that once a week beer is turning into like a nightly thing and it's not stopping, and like, this is kind of keeping my nervous system regulated in a way. So it's the prevention of substance abuse and not just the treatment of, that I think was really exciting.
Stephanie, I'm so
Yeah.
sorry. We're going to have to close. It is half an hour is really fast. You think, oh, 30 minutes, sweet, I can do all this stuff. I'm going to hand it over to Yvette.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody. Hello, my name is Sue Tam, and I bring you blessings from the Pasquayaki tribe. We're hoping that we are working together for the benefit of mankind and remain close to the Great Spirit to do what you know to be right. So thank you very much for joining this session. I'd like to welcome two speakers today, Phyllis Spears, who is a citizen of the Cherokee Nation, and she's been my mentor along with Ashatari Perez. Phyllis has been working in Native American communities and has been spreading the word of NADA. And together we are in partnership working to train as many Native American people so that they can find some healing. So I'd like to go ahead and have Phyllis do her presentation. She will take about 15 minutes, and then we will go to Mr. Albino Garcia. Thank you, Phyllis.
Okay, Osio de God, Gali Eliga, Jijiluk, Kohi. Welcome everyone, I'm glad you're here. Aya Phyllis Dawado, Jijalik, Talik, Janela. And that's, my name is Phyllis. I'm a Cherokee citizen and I'm in Tahlequah, Oklahoma. And in my slide presentation, you can see here, I'm working with Native communities mostly. And the photo on top is of Babakiveri Peak, which is the Tohono Nation near the US-Mexican border. And then I've got a photo here of Anchorage and then another photo up on the Navajo Nation. So just to let you see some of the places that our Navajo, our Native people are. Next. So I want to just take a moment here. I was not the original speaker for this presentation. It was Arlo Star Jigesa. He just passed from this world about a month ago. He was not only a trainer with me, he was a friend and like a little brother. He was also a Cherokee citizen, and he worked in Native communities for many years, but he worked doing acupuncture and acu-detox, most recently up in Acoma and the Pueblos and in the Navajo Nation. He also worked with a veterans group in the Northwest Pacific to do canoe journeys for the veterans there to help with their healing. But for me, we met every week to work on our language. He believed that culture and language was what really would help heal Native people, that by learning our language, we help to get in touch with our culture. So that was something he also very, very much focused on. He was really such a treasure in working with the communities. As Ryan said, he went with him to help do trainings, and he also worked with me. So anyway, he was just a treasure, just a treasure. Next slide. So just a minute, I wanted to talk about who we are as Native people. We're about 2% of the population in the US, according to this census, so that might change with the new numbers coming out. And I also wanted to point out that we're very much an urban population. I think the latest statistics I've seen, about 70% of the Native population live in or near an urban area. So many of those folks are away from their communities, they're away from their culture. So those things that help with healing sometimes are not available to them, or they might not even be aware of them. Next slide. Many of our family, many of our parents went to boarding school or grew up not speaking their languages. And so they're away from those things. But we're at 574 federally recognized tribes, which means we still have a lot of work to do. We've got AccuDetox in some communities, but we have many, many communities to go. So that's going to be my challenge to people, is to get out and get trained and become a trainer and train more people. Next slide. I was first introduced to AccuDetox back in 1998, and Ashatari was the one that introduced me to it. I always try to let people know that's where I started. And when I brought it out to the tribal members, because I thought it was wonderful, I thought it was the best thing. Most of the tribal members were very open to this kind of healing. Our Native traditional cultures very much have energy healing. We very much use herbal medicine. And even some of the tribes have a history of using porcupine quills, cactus needles, or bones to do acupuncture, acupressure, and massage. So all these things were concepts that were not new, I don't believe, to Native people. The growth of it really kind of waxed and waned, I'll say. It took about 10 years, I believe, to really get AccuDetox embedded in the programs there in Tonaotum, and I think also over in Yaqui. You really need a champion to move those things through, people who will get trained, continue to push the programs, write grants. I also wanted to add, one of the places that we're also doing it right now is in Albuquerque. Arlo trained some folks there in Albuquerque, and one of them is now volunteering at the Urban Indian program, working with the homeless population. Anyway, I just wanted to challenge people, and especially challenge Native people, to be trained, to become trainers. I know some of the people I've trained, they've been doing this long enough that I think they might be ready to become trainers. And I want them to do that. I'm happy to help. So thank you. I think my time is just close to up, but are there any questions yet, or?
Thank you, Phyllis. Can everybody hear me? Okay, thank you for the great work in Native American communities. You can see that as evidenced by Phyllis's work, she has inspired people in the Tohono Nation to do the work outside of clinical work and to provide grassroots services. Thank you. Next, I would like to introduce to you Mr. Albino Garcia Jr. Albino, are you there? So Albino identifies as a Chichimeca, and he will talk to you a little bit about that. He's a grassroots person, and he will share his work about La Placita Institute. Take it on from here, Albino. Thank you.
Thank you. So I first want to say and give my respects to my co-panelist, Arlo. I didn't know him well, but I'd met him several times because here in my organization, we are an institute, a center of gravity for traditional healing. So I heard, initially saw that he was co-presenting, and then And then, of course, we heard of his passing. So I just want to pay my respects to him, his memory, and his and all his relations. So my name is Albino Garcia. I'm Chichimeca and Apache, and I live and work here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm the executive director of La Placita Institute in the South Valley of Albuquerque. 87105 is our zip code. We have some great challenges as all places do, but this particular zip code has in the county has the highest rate of incarcerated and adjudicated people, both youth and adults. And thus, we have the highest rate of returning citizens, men and women who are system impacted, coming back home to our communities with great needs for healing. Many of them, as me personally, my credentials. Let me just backtrack and say that my credentials. I'm not a licensed person. I'm not very formally educated. Actually, very transparently and with no qualms or shame about it. I'm a bona fide 8th grader. That's about as far as I went in public schools. I was a recipient of trauma, and I became a product of it, and I became a perpetrator of it. So, I got locked up as a kid, in and out, and I faced a good hard sentence at the age of 17. And in lieu of prison in the 70s, that tells you how old I am, I ended up in the military, on the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea, at the age of 17. And when I got out, I went right back to the same lifestyle I knew, and I struggled. And I made my shift and my change some years later, partly because I attended a rehabilitation program for Native men. And there I was introduced to the sacred fire, ceremonial way of life, the red road, many call it. And I began my journey inward, towards my core culture, my ancestral way of life. And fast forward, I'm good at working with men and women in the system, inside and outside. And in 95, I was acknowledged for my work with the streets and in prisons and detention facilities and so forth. And my approach, which isn't mine exclusively, but we call it La Cultura Cura, which translates to culture heals. And part of that is where NADA comes in, but it's not exclusive. We believe in transnational curanderismo, traditional healing, continental United States, Turtle Island. And, being here in Albuquerque, we're one of the, largest urban Indian populations in the country. We're a center of gravity for a lot of relocated and dislocated people. And we have an urban center called La Placita Institute, and we have a curandero house. We have a temazcali, which is a Mexican version of an ipi or sweat lodge. We have both a male and a female sweat lodge. And we practice various ceremonies for the people. In that is the NADA protocol. And so you'd be, quite surprised, at least I am still, to the reaction of others. Because at first response, when people look at me, they see an old cholo carrying a little box with needles and everything, and they wouldn't assume a person like me with my background would be handling them with care. and nurturing. And so we transcend assumptions and stereotypes. And, you know, we very much appreciate the NADA protocol because it is powerful, it is accessible, it is, you know, ours now, and it has been. Most people don't know. I mentioned on the prep that, you know, Mayans and Aztecs, you know, also practiced a form of acupuncture and acupressure. And so, you know, when we bring those teachings back to our people and we let them know that this is theirs, it's not, you know, a foreign construct exclusively, they take ownership in it, and they're much more susceptible to receiving it. So, you know, I work with some really difficult people, especially young ones. We work with the most violent kids who have shot and maimed and created and done heinous crime, as well as adults. And we primarily, but don't exclusively, serve indigenous people. It just happens to be the makeup of you know, the communities we reside in, we come from. There's so much more I would like to share, but I do want to leave time in our session for those questions and answers. I'm honored to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Albino Garcia. Can you all hear me? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you for the work that you do. While I was speaking, you said you've been there, done that, and that's just coming from the heart, that you understand what goes on and what kind of healing needs to be done. I appreciate that very much. That was a takeaway for me. I do have a question from Anne-Marie. It is, how to overcome resistance to non-native person coming in with a technique that we know will help, but they don't want to meet with me because I'm non-native. Can one of you answer that?
Well, I can tell you it's not always just because you're non-native. I've been trying to get in here at the Cherokee Nation for a couple of years now and struggling with that. But one of the things when you come in as a non-native is don't come in assuming that you're going to bring something to them. Find out what you can do to help and get to know the community, because it's really about relationships in the Native community. So walking in cold is not necessarily accepted, I would say. And Sue and Albino, you probably both know this also.
I'll share a little bit on that. You know, it's interesting, again, you know, the perceptions, you know, that people have when they look upon others. And, you know, I think the diversity of Native people, there's a lot of assumption that certain people are or are not Native. And for some time, transparently, I used to, you know, find myself spending time trying to articulate that I was an indigenous man. And I don't waste my time doing that anymore because, you know, when you're working with the very diversity of Native people, you know, they like any other group, size you up, and they want to know, you know, who you are, where you come from, but it's got to be on their terms. And so if you impose that, I find that it sets them off a little bit. So, you know, let it be, you know, on their schedule and their time. Know who you are and know who you're not, and then and that will take care of the majority of the introduction.
Those are great suggestions. I know that on the Native American tribes, sometimes we spend a lot of time building trust with people because their trust has been broken. And so we're developing a relationship. For me over here on the Pasquayaki tribe, I try to train as many native and non-native people so that that service is accessible to anybody and they feel comfortable providing services. My hope is this afternoon during your breakout sessions, you will share your the interventions that you have provided and any successes that you have had providing NADA, and also providing NADA along with other complementary medicines like healing, massage work, and stuff like that. The next question I have comes from Terry Williams. Wanted to ask Albino Garcia, is NADA a sponsored service or is it provided on a volunteer basis?
Right. So, you know, we try as best as we can here in this organization, although, you know, I raise money. We're mostly philanthropic, you know, resources. We have some contracts, but not for the services that we provide. And we try to maintain cultural virtue in what we provide. So, you know, today, and we're very fortunate, we're 17 years old, and we have never charged for a single service out of this organization and still don't today. We've never charged for one needling on anyone. And we've been certified since 2013. I have. And that's to us a traditional approach, right? So, you know, if people want to give a donation or something like that, of course, but we don't have a sign that says, you know, love donation only or anything like that, etc. We, you know, if they genuinely offer something, fine. So I think the, you know, cultural and traditional integrity for providing medicine and traditional services, which this fits under in our program. That's what we call it. We don't have a, you know, a cost protocol in this organization. We're happy about that.
Thank you. Phyllis, did you want to respond to that?
About cost or?
About how other Native American tribes provide that service, whether it's sponsored or
yeah, usually it's within their tribal program, so there's not a cost to go. So that means anyone can go to it without cost. And for many programs, it's self-referral. You don't have to have a provider, you know, write your referral to come in, so that you can decide if you want to come. And a lot of times it's the workers out in the community, the CHRs, the wellness folks, who see people and encourage them to come to these programs.
Thank you. One of my early discoveries was when I was interacting with Ashatari. I do need to mention Ashatari and her work with the homeless population and working with the RAP program in an organization over here in Tucson. Hopefully she will share some of that. Want to invite you if you'd like to talk about it.
What we would like to do next is to share some recognitions and awards to people in the NADA community, both in the United States and beyond. And so the first award that I would like to provide is really kind of coming off of the Beads and Seeds breakout session. It was a really wonderful session, and we would like to recognize actually a group. And this group is located in Northern Ireland. And we've heard about them through Guide Points, which is our quarterly newsletter. We also have a film on our website that was actually made by Sheila Murphy and her son, and she's on this meeting about NADA in restorative justice settings. there are two sets of awards. So I'm going to share my screen right now to show the first one. So Anne Marie, if you could stop screen sharing just for a moment. Thank you so much. And sorry, 1 second. So the first award that we'd like to give is to Trish Cathcart. And I'm so sorry. There we go. Trish Cathcart is a counselor and is a person who works for 360 oh goodness. Actually, I think Start 360. And she introduced NADA to all the prisons in Northern Ireland over the last 5 years. And then most recently, she was able to bring in the beads and seeds and actually have recovery mentors teach other prisoners how to apply the beads and seeds and have them apply themselves. Right now during COVID time, they are, as she said, they have a lockdown within the facility. And so they can only teach, they can't have any contact with the prisoners, but they can teach them how to administer the beads onto their own ears. And so we are presenting this award to Trish Cathcart for her pioneering work. And then each one of the recovery mentors, there's 8 of them. Their names are Albert, Desi, Billy, Eamon, Paul, Ryan C., and Ryan T. We really commend you for your work in the prison and for inspiring people worldwide to do this. Thank you for it. And we hope that you'll see this recognition in this video. We understand you weren't able to make one for us in the circumstances that you are in. But it's very inspiring to hear about that work. I will share in the chat in just a minute the story and guide points from last year in which we talked about this. So thank you for giving space a little bit to the international NADA community. It is just as vibrant and an incredible extension of who we are here in North America. The next award that I wanted to share is to a person who is here right now. Susan Williams, if you would unmute yourself, if you are muted.
Hi, Sarah.
Hey. Susan Williams, sorry, I have too many screens open. Because Susan Williams is a consumer member and current chairperson of the Arizona Acupuncture Board. And Susan has been there from the beginning with the Arizona Advocacy Group forming as an entity. She came to a meeting in Tucson, Arizona to have a conversation about how can we expand access beyond the existing ADS law that exists in Arizona to more Arizonans. And she feels really personally passionate about that. And so we just owe a big debt of gratitude for you, Susan, and for taking a stand for NADA and for supporting it on the governmental level of the Acupuncture Board. So this will actually come to you in the mail, but we wanted to sort of show it so everybody can see it. There's a couple of minutes if you'd like to say anything from your side. I'll stop sharing now.
No, I would just love to thank NADA and in particular, Judge Pyle. He has been really instrumental in helping me overcome my fear of going before the legislature, and it all actually went well until the legislature got closed down. So we were this close to passing new laws here in the state, and we will go back at it again next year. I also want to acknowledge Sue Tham, who was my trainer. I became a auricular acupuncturist, as they're called here in Arizona, and then Stephanie Sarnosky, who actually introduced me to community acupuncture many years ago and has been fantastic. So thank you to everyone, and thank you. This is an unexpected and lovely thing. I'm very grateful and humbled by all the work that everyone's doing. So thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
All right. So in this panel, so this is the criminal justice settings panel, right?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. And so the speakers are Sophia Chavez, Rachel Freer, Erica Vigiano, and Sean Taylor, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Yeah, so thank you. So, you know, I know it's strange and challenging to all of us. So again, I invite the panelists to please start their discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Yvette. So this is Chuck Pyle here. This is a topic near and dear to my heart, having spent so many years as a judge in the criminal justice system. The people in jail and prison, you know, you can count on 2/3 to 3/4 of them having substance use issues and trauma issues. So there's a great need for NADA treatments in this population. But the system enforcing our criminal laws is usually quite insulated and frequently somewhat suspicious of outsiders. So it's another area where it's hard for us to make the connections that we need to. You're going to hear from 4 people who have successfully made those connections. Erica Vigiano is a healthcare provider for over 30 years and emphasizing integrative therapies and mindfulness and treatment of high-risk youth. So she's going to look at it from the juvenile angle. Rachel Fryer is an addiction and substance abuse counselor at Centennial Medical Health Center near Denver. And she used NADA in several jails in Colorado. She got access to several of the county jails in Colorado. And Sophia Chavez as a doctor of naturopathic medicine and founded the Astara Health and Wellness Center in emphasizing indigenous, holistic, and integrative therapies. Sean Taylor is the Deputy Executive Director of an amazing organization, the Second Chance Center in Aurora, Colorado. And Sean himself served 20 years in prison. Sean and Sophia have been successful in bringing beads and seeds into the Sterling Correctional Facility, the state prison in Colorado. So we're going to start with Erica, then Rachel, then Sophia, and then Sean talking about their experiences in getting these wonderful therapies into the system. So Erica, you're on.
Thank you, Chuck. I think I need to share my screen. I don't know if I have co-host status yet. Here we go. Just give me a moment. Okay, can everybody hear and see me?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So this is my first NADA conference, and I just want to say I'm really honored to be able to share my experiences here in Colorado. I'm extremely humbled and inspired to hear about the work everybody's doing. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience working mostly with incarcerated youth is what I'm going to be speaking about here in Colorado, and a little bit about what on an administrative level they're trying to do within Division of Youth Services, which is, for a little bit of context, it's the committed side of the juvenile justice system, meaning that youth that I serve have been unsuccessful in less restrictive environments. And so the state commits them to youth corrections, and most of them are in locked or secure settings for a period of time. So even though I have relationships and have worked in and around this system for like 25 years, my role right now is as an independent contractor. And I was trained 4 or 5 years ago as an AccuDetox specialist by MK Christian. So for the last 4 or 5 years, I've been able to integrate NADA into my practice as a clinical social worker, addictions counselor, and yoga therapist. So let me first talk a little bit about what Youth Corrections, the Division of Youth Services, actually, they changed their name, is trying to do. About 2 years ago, the drug and alcohol service providers identified some money to train 5 to 10 individuals to be AccuDetox specialists. And starting last year, about in February, they had gone through all the policies and procedures to allow mental health practitioners, behavioral health specialists, to start administering NADA. What they did was they did a little pilot group with some detained youth, and they found that the youth, after receiving NADA, had a greater sense of calm. They felt a much less intense level of anger, decreased anxiety, and were able to move forward in trying to make NADA available as a group. And so everybody remembers what happened last February. They were just about to start this group, and we had the COVID pandemic. But what I know from working with some of my own individual clients is that a lot of the youth were very open and very interested. One youth in particular who I had already been doing NADA with was extremely happy to be able to get NADA treatments more frequently throughout the week. Most of these youth have sleep problems. As we've been discussing, most of them have trauma and addiction problems.
Erica, I'm so
yeah.
sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to check really quick. We don't see any slides. I don't know if you're trying to show slides right now, but we all just see
the
like,
one?
no, we just see two gray squares.
Oh, that's strange.
You might need to
Erica,
turn it
you're
up.
showing us your presenter view, so you just need to change the, yeah. So go ahead to click on slideshow on that screen.
Oh, I thought I had it in slideshow mode. Can you see it now?
No, no, no. It's still presenter view. So again, if you exit out of that real quick and then go to the top bar, you see that slideshow. So it's on transition, or you're clicking on home right now. So at the very top, right near the search bar, it says slideshow.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to reshare it. Does that look better?
It's still the presenter view. I think you might have to do it from the top bar, not the bottom button that you're using, because I think the bottom button puts it so that we see your notes instead of the slides themselves.
Oh. That's not working now?
No. I also have the slides, Erica, if you want me to try sharing from my screen. And
Yeah, why don't you just try that? I just wanted to be sure that the photographs were not reproduced.
Yeah, no worries. Here,
okay.
You can keep talking and I'll get it.
Okay. Okay. So as I was saying, many youth in the system have not only single incident trauma or several single incident traumas, but they also have childhood trauma, which makes it very difficult for them to regulate their emotions and their nervous system. So you can go ahead and show the first slide. What I've done with many of these youth is have taught them other techniques that they can use to stay settled in their mind and body while they're receiving NADA. Many of them, of course, already have trauma-related problems that make it difficult for them to be still. And then, of course, they're in a very stressful and overstimulating environment. So you can go to the next slide if you're able to. Which should be a photograph. You can move to the next one. So this is an example of using some sensory motor support. What you're seeing is a young woman who has a blanket on her chest and an eye pillow. She has also chosen to support her head a little bit. And what I do is I try to teach youth a lot of techniques they can use to make themselves feel more safe and comfortable, so that everything that's happening is something that they're choosing. Even though I do a lot of talk therapy when I treat trauma, talking can be incredibly burdensome, especially if you are hyper aroused and you're overactivated in your nervous system. So once they know they have these choices, that they can use eye pillows, they can do certain postures. You could advance to the next slide. they can elevate their legs. They can really have a lot of choice and mastery in terms of how to feel more comfortable so that the needles can actually just do their work. So the element of choice has been really important with many of these young people. Sometimes they come in and they know that they don't want to talk on a certain day, and they are able to choose to just do nada. They can choose to do nada after they have a particularly stressful session where they're talking about a lot of emotionally challenging issues. And oftentimes after they have the nada treatment, they are much more comfortable just speaking. So it's really had an amazing impact as an integrated nonverbal method that supports trauma treatment. What I was really excited to do yesterday, we finally got permission to use seeds, and I was going to show a couple of clients how to self-apply seeds. I'm also involving the therapists that they have in the facility, in the locked facility, one of whom is also an ADS trained person. And so since I've been only doing teletherapy with them remotely for the last 6 months, we're very excited to see how we can use seeds. What I'm even more excited about with the use of seeds is that, you know, while the needles are something that can be this beautiful intervention where somebody does not have to make a lot of effort and they receive the gift of calming down in their nervous system, the seeds are something that, of course, they're going to be able to use that's within their control, that they don't have to depend on anyone or anybody else to do. And that can be incredibly powerful, especially in a locked environment where you have very little control over much. So I'm really excited about getting permission to do this. I'm hoping that we can soon get Katie Gannon. I'm not sure if she's listening today, but for her to start her group again and do self-application rather than needles. So we're just at the beginning of a lot of that. And I guess I'll just wrap up by saying, you know, I had the advantage of many long-term relationships that allowed me to start doing this in locked facilities with youth. Anybody who has the passion to try to work with youth who are in these kinds of complicated bureaucratic systems, I would just suggest finding a champion on the inside. You know, give them a treatment. It's important to have their alliance because these systems are sometimes by necessity very complicated. Lots of clearances are needed. You need to build a relationship so that people have confidence in you and what you're doing. But once that happens, they can be a huge ally in helping you navigate from the inside all of the different clearances that have to happen. So the wheels turn very, very slowly, but I'm excited that they're turning. And, you know, for the duration that we have limitations from COVID, I'm just really excited about the possibility that we can get some great benefits from seeds as well. So I really appreciate your time and listening, and I'm available for questions at any point, or if you want to email me, I'd be happy. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't show you some of these are just a couple of other ways that youth have chosen. This woman has just a teeny tiny bit of her nose showing. And so these are choices that they've made in order to feel safe while they're receiving the NADA treatment. And there might be, I think those are all the photographs. Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you, Erica. Very well done. And Rachel, you want to jump in and talk about your experiences with county jails in Colorado?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Erica and Chuck. So I'm Rachel Fryrear. I'm the Judicial Services Director for a community mental health center called Centennial Mental Health out here in northeastern Colorado. And so I want to talk to you a little bit today about more or less the implementation, how we got started in the discussion in providing the acute detox service to our county rural jails out here in rural Colorado. So I'll be speaking in present, future, past tense, because a lot of this work obviously was originated pre-COVID. And just to give you a little bit of background, and I'm going to put a timer on so I can be mindful of our time today. But just to give you a little bit of background, the state of Colorado was awarded a substantial grant through tobacco and now some marijuana tax revenue in order to provide treatment, mental health treatment and substance abuse treatment to inmates. And so that started in 2011. And so we, the Community Mental Health Center, partnering with 7 jails. We serve a very large catchment area. We have actually a 10-county catchment area. And within that area, we actually we were servicing 7 jails at the time. And so started this substance abuse program in 2011. And so that's when the relationships started, you know, us trying to learn a little more about the systems, if you will. I have a history and background in DOC, so I was pretty familiar going into some of the jails, but these are very small jails, and we're looking at capacity anywhere from maybe 10 inmates to a highest population of maybe 90. So very, very small, single cell sometimes, holding cells, but we were trying to establish relationships, and that's where I would say the most important part of this piece with an introduction to AccuDetox is forming the relationship with the staff. So when we started in 2011, I didn't become an ADS until a few years after that. Both MK and Libby were my teachers. And so inspiring. And I do remember during that training telling MK, you know, this was my goal. My goal was to introduce this into the jail system. And it took me, and eventually my staff getting trained as a team, it took us several years to get into the systems. And the way that we did that was providing the service to the sheriffs. These are small communities, and you know, they really do forge relationships very closely. And you know, if you have, it's like, hey, we have this new kind of system. This can help with, would you say, decreasing maybe behavioral outbursts. You know, this can help your staff as well, because knowing that there's a lot of incident stress, trauma, you know, relationships between even correctional staff themselves. And so I had about 5 providers providing treatment in these small jails, including myself. My staff would help to provide the treatment to the inmates, and I was actually working more with the staff. So we were working with courtside individuals, people in Elbert County, Fort Morgan. There had been many times where a lot of the staff were wondering where I was, you know, if I had went on vacation, are you coming back? So we know that with inmates, obviously, but you know, they benefit from the treatment, but I was seeing a lot of benefit from the staff. The staff were just really kind of overworked or just very tired and very stressed. So they would certainly look forward to this opportunity. And Marie, I don't know if you have access to a couple of my slides. I just kind of want to show what we eventually had to do was develop a procedure and protocol to the staff in order to let them know that, we're bringing in needles, but we do have a protocol on how we're making sure that the environment is safe, and that we're counting our needles, and, you know, because that was certainly such a huge concern. you're bringing in needles. And then even some of our medical staff were very concerned about that too, and wondering if that would somehow affect some of their treatments. And so it took a long time to kind of educate the staff about this process. And actually, let me see if I can go ahead and share. I'd like to go ahead and share my screen.
Tuna, hi, can you look for a co-host?
Thank you.
I really love that message about you treating the staff, because that's always been my dream, is to have it available in jail for both prisoners and staff. Both sides of the population are under tremendous stress, particularly now in the age of COVID.
Oh, absolutely. And I tell you, it's so inspiring that the Beads and Seeds breakout as well, just is giving me more or less the route that we need to get back into, because currently right now we're not able to provide the service on site. A lot of our platform is telehealth. But then again, if we can go ahead and, prepare, those cards and talk about how they can put the seeds in. A lot of the staff enjoyed the seeds as well. And some of them actually preferred seeds over the needles. So I'd always make sure I was well prepared. Let me see. I'm still not able to share my screen. Thank you. So I just want to share this really quickly with everybody. This just really seemed to help kind of seal the deal, if you will, with administration, is that we just came up with our own kind of procedure forms, definitely talking about the background and purpose and why we provide this treatment, and the various locations that we were providing these services, because this was a large contract, demographic contract, and within the Logan County, they help to oversee the other various jails. And so I'll just kind of run through this quickly. The training requirements, just kind of showing that, yes, we've been through, the proper training, the 70-hour training. We do provide the consents to treatment. We're talking about the particulars of instruction and how we provide that we were doing these in group settings. Who's eligible, anyone who's interested, 18 and over, that's what our program was serving. And we do not ask for payment. We don't in our outpatient offices either. So this is a free treatment for anyone, including our staff, our own staff. But I think a really important part is the safety concerns, that there's the sharp container, and that everything is distributed and accounted for once you're done with your session. And of course, the potential side effects that had come up. So certainly things come up because they're in procedure now and in a policy. So we had kind of a particular incident where an inmate had some bruising. And so we know that to be a side effect, but that's certainly something you want to make sure you have in your policy. And I think I think this is just crucial, a wellness benefit to jail and administrative staff. I'd have them just kind of call me, hey, can you come over and do this right away? Even from this implementation, we've had one of our nurses in one of our jails go through training, so she's ADS as well. So we're just continuing. We want to continue to teach. I want to get this back into our systems now, and I think with this conference today, it's just been really helpful and inspiring. So I thank you all so very much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Rachel. That's great, and could be helpful to anybody who's trying to get into a correctional setting. That's really useful. So, Sophia, you have a video you prepared, but would you like to introduce the video, or we're going to start right out with, okay, here we go. Let's start with the video here. Go ahead, Anne-Marie.
Hello, my name is Sophia Chavez, and I appreciate this opportunity to be able to share with you my experiences of providing NADA to individuals at Lyman Prison and in community here in Colorado. I'm originally from New Mexico. My family is Spanish, Native American, and Mexican. I was raised with a lot of ceremony and believing in the mind-body-spirit connection and how that influences our health. I have a doctorate in natural medicine and a doctorate in spiritual practices. I graduated from a seminary. My life's work revolves around my ministerial work. I am educated in trauma protocols, but I also grew up in a very violent environment. And just to give you an example of the seriousness of my PTSD, I would drive to the University of New Mexico in the morning. I'd go to a class at the anthropology building, and I would remember driving there, sitting down for the class in the morning, and then I would wake up at the end of the day around 4:30, 5 o'clock, sitting at my desk across the city of Albuquerque in the South Valley. So I would lose a whole day because of trauma. And many people in our communities, the people certainly in our who are in our prisons, have experienced this kind of trauma, this kind of PTSD. PTSD can start as an emotional thing, a mental pain, but then eventually it moves into the body, and what we have is chronic pain. I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, my PTSD, a dissociation disorder, and I was able to heal. I have combined NADA with ancestral ceremony, and the effects have been profound. I tell my participants to focus on what is sacred to them. This is not about religion. Some of our participants are Muslim, Christian, Jewish, agnostic, atheist. This is about what is sacred to you, what is holy to you. And that's not about religion. It's about what is sacred to you. I provide ceremony so that we can have a heart-to-heart connection, corazón a corazón, so that we can connect mind, body, and spirit. There's a saying that you're only as good as the people that you surround yourself with. And I certainly believe that's true about myself. I'm nobody. I'm no one. But when I work with certain groups of people, what we do together in the name of love can be amazing. I work with an amazing group of people who are compassionate and heart-centered, and together we've been able to do good work. We were involved in a grant that was paid for by Colorado Public Health. It was a grant for individuals who had experienced violence or who had experienced trauma through violence. We hit over 200% enrollment and reached over 96% of the historically underserved and people of color. Again, this grant was paid for by Colorado Public Health. Our participants reported decreased symptoms in depression, chronic pain, anxiety. They certainly all said that they were feeling more joy or more happiness. At the prison, at Lyman Prison, there was a really good heart-to-heart connection. What you would see when we would go in there, we were never able to use needles in the prison, only in community, but we would use something like this. This is an obsidian needle, and we would use this to stimulate the NADA points. And then after we would stimulate the NADA points, we would also use the seeds. We always use the ceremonial pieces of sound, aroma. The other ancestral ceremonial pieces are always added to the work. You would see the individuals at the prison, you would see their posture relax. You would see their face muscles relax. There was a softening that would take place. Oftentimes we would hear sniffles. On occasion, maybe see a tear or two. But this is a place where people are expected to man up, to be strong. And yet, in that environment, we were able to bring people to a deep state of relaxation The relaxation response resets how our mind and our body are working together. The main point for our participants that we wanted them to know is that they have value in this world. It's not about anything that they've said, it's not about anything that they have done, but because they are part of our human family. We, at every site that we are at, we talk about the fact that we are all equal. No matter what our society tries to tell us, no matter what the overculture tries to tell us, we focus on love. And especially during this time of national crisis regarding racism and the injustices that are taking place in the United States, this is a time to focus on love. I believe that NADA can be a modality, is a modality that can help heal people, that can help people improve their life. I've seen it. It has a profound effect. And again, I really appreciate this opportunity to have been able to share with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for preparing that, Sophia. And our last speaker is Sean Taylor, who's the Deputy Executive Director of the Second Chance Center in Aurora, Colorado, one of the premier reentry focused nonprofits in the country from my point of view. And Sean can speak to us both from the aspect of somebody who provides services and someone who has received services and has lived experience. So Sean, why don't you share your thoughts with us?
Hello, everybody. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Doing good.
My name is Sean Ashi Taylor. I am the Deputy Executive Director for Second Chance Center. For the past 8 years, Second Chance Center has tried our best to provide the resources, care, training, equitable opportunities, clothing, and tools that men and women re-entering society from incarceration need to be successful at never returning to prison, to drug addiction, or to negative behavior. I served 22 years in prison, from the age of 17 to the age of 38. I had a life sentence that was commuted by the governor. And while I was happy that I was getting out of prison, I kind of had high anxiety about not really having much family in Colorado, which meant that I wouldn't have much support. Anxiety about not having a job, about not having a place to stay, feeling as if I was going to have a very difficult task of trying to become housed and employed. I also realized that I learned some behavior in prison. I learned some behavior that caused me to be tense most of the time. For those of us who have been incarcerated, you know what I'm talking about. You always seem to have to be ready to defend yourself against something. Working at Second Chance Center afforded me the opportunity to ask other returning citizens if they experience the same anxiety within their reentry experience. And most of us do. Most of us do. Not unlike soldiers returning from fighting for the country, former offenders are not often welcomed with open arms either. We feel pressure from parole orders and depression from rejection. My own experience with the culturally informed chanting and positive affirmations and acupressure and aromatherapy and really the educated guidance from Dr. Sophia and her crew, it was positive for me. It was positive for me in many ways. And many individuals who were incarcerated, who experienced all of those things as well, reported so many positive outcomes, which had to do with relaxation. Dr. Sophia and all the people who assist her create an environment that allows for true relaxation, and relaxation allowed me and some of the other participants a process, to really look at the past, the present, and the future with more clarity. I had emotional releases, spiritual experiences. I felt a renewed energy when I would leave these sessions. I was very impressed. Second Chance Center was very impressed. I was so impressed that I asked Dr. Sophia and her crew to accompany me to my mentoring sessions at Lyman Correctional Facility. I teach a mentoring course at Lyman Correctional Facility at least once a week. It is called I Live, or Influencing Leaders to Inspire Visions of Excellence. It is a group of men who have decided to move their lives in a positive direction. And we have committed to helping each other with this task. Lyman LCF is a facility with gang and political violence that seems to always lurk around, despite most of the time being a peaceful environment. The men in this facility are not only tense because of that energy, some of the rules in the prison are rigid and don't allow for positive congregations. So guys can't really get together and talk it out. When they came together and listened to Dr. Sophia educate them about acupressure, indigenous healing, and the importance of it all, they felt more comfortable with closing their eyes and allowing the process to work for them. All of them reported positive outcomes, all of them. Some of them thanked Dr. Sophia and her crew for creating a space for them to truly relax. For a long time, they hadn't been able to relax. If this type of work could be expanded and funding allow expansion into treatment opportunities for all formerly and currently incarcerated people, I think we would notice a decrease in violence, drug addiction, and negative behavior inside and outside of prison. We would be able to contribute to public safety by reducing the amount of stress and negative behavior within people returning from incarceration. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. That's incredibly well said. And thanks to everybody on the panel. I don't know that we have any questions, but maybe I could give all four panelists 1 minute to just kind of wrap up with some closing thoughts, and we'll just go in the order we started with Erica, then Rachel, then Sophia, and Sean, you get to close it out, but all four presentations were wonderful. Thank you so much. Erica, you want to have a few closing thoughts?
I'm just sort of feeling kind of overwhelmed. I thanked Libby and MK for making it possible for all of us to do a lot of this work by getting some legislation passed several years ago so that, those of us within the scope of our practice could get trained to do this. And so I'm just aware that sometimes the wheels turn very slowly, but it's presentations and times like this where, can just see the collective impact. And so just want to encourage everybody to just continue pushing, just moving the ball forward. Right now, I feel like sometimes I'm just moving it a quarter inch, if that. But, this is really giving me some encouragement to just keep going and trying to penetrate some of these systems that are not always set up to see people as whole human beings. So thank you all for everything that you're doing and inspiring me.
Right. Thank you, Erica. Rachel, a few last thoughts?
Absolutely. I just certainly am very encouraged really to get back at this again. And of course, moving the pendulum just, it's creeping there, but there's still momentum behind all of this. And it's just a lot of hope that we have hope and that we really do need this in the world today. And so I'm just truly inspired. And so thank you. I put my contact information in the chat as well, but feel free, anyone reach out. I have other kind of consent forms if anyone wants to take a look at that, what that would look like. But thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Sophia, a couple last thoughts?
Can you hear me? Yes?
A little bit muted, but go ahead. Go for it.
So I work at Denver Health, and it's a little hard to get connection through our computer system because it's such a secure system. So hopefully you can hear me if I talk really loud. But I just want to say that I appreciate all of you. And like Sean, I really feel that we can make a difference both in our communities and in the prison system. It's amazing using needles, using beads. The magic ingredient is love. It's just being there for people, showing up for them. And so I appreciate all of you, and I hope that we can make good connections after this conference and continue to do our work together. Thank you all.
Right. I think Dr. Smith said 10% needles, 90% intention, something like that. Sean, you've been batting cleanup the whole way. Why don't you close us out here? Thank you so much for your participation.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank everyone for allowing me to be a part of this. I learned so much. And, just speaking on behalf of the guys who are kind of having a hard time right now because all of the COVID lockdown, they don't really have a lot to do. They're in their cells a lot. They're in their pods a lot. They're in their cell houses a lot. And I just say, if you are a praying person, then reach out with prayer for them, that they get healed. Remember some of the things that Dr. Sophia taught them, and come home safely.
Great. Thank you, Sean. And thanks to everybody on the panel. I think it was an important topic, and you guys did a great job sharing how you've been able to impact the justice system. Thanks again. I'll turn it over to Sarah or somebody here.
Thank you, Chuck.
Talked a lot about beads and C's, and we've got both existing and newer resources. Invite you to check out. Links are coming in the chat. And we mentioned guide points. If you're new to NADA, this is one of the main ways we stay in touch and share stories. So definitely sign up for that, and you can check out all the past issues on our website. Oh, that's me.
such wonderful people.
I'm so confused.
You're wonderful too.
Oh, thank you.
You are. You're
Jalal, you want to have a conversation about social justice and that?
Let's do it right now. Okay, you guys.
Is this a social justice room?
This is a social justice room now. I see Stephanie. So.
I never left. I've been here the whole time.
Oh my God. Okay, well, I'm going to just hand it to you.
I've just been waiting. I mean, the main presenter for that room was Sean.
Who's not, who I can't find.
And he's not responding. And you guys don't see him anywhere in the chats, huh?
No, and it's S-E-A-N.
S-E-A-N, and then his middle name begins with an A, and then the last name is Taylor. I've texted him, I've called him, it went straight to voicemail. But I think, let's talk about social justice, right? I mean, we all know NADA started out as social justice, right? Grassroots social justice. How do you think it's being used today in forms of social justice? I know Jalal said she wanted to talk a little bit about it.
Well, I going back to one of the first things we had talked about in this gathering today, about decolonization. That's one of the deepest things for me about social justice is taking out all my new favorite word is axiom. So taking out all the axioms of healthcare, taking out all the axioms of colonizer, Western, patriarchal systems that we are all imbued with, and cleansing it, basically replacing the structure of the sponge with something that's not, that's still useful, but doesn't, isn't imbued with all the axioms of race, class, gender, etc. And there's so much to be taken out, and it does require a lot of, one of my groups earlier was saying about space, and that someone in the system, in the acupuncture, NADA, or hierarchy or something, had said that basically just let the needles do their work, stick and step back and leave the person space. And that is something that is not being done in a lot of circles, a lot of medical systems, a lot of any kind of system that's been colonized by colonizers. And so that's that space, that quiet, that lack of need to fill a void that a lot of colonizer patriarchal adherents ignore. Mm-hmm. So whenever there's a space, so many people want to fill that space, and creating space just for it to be space is something that is very new, very old.
Yes, exactly. And Donna shared a point, doing with versus to, and that's, that is, I think it's what's interesting about a social justice breakout is that basically everything we've seen presented today, and how we're using NADA today, is an act of social justice. We have seen so many people using NADA, this simple tool that doesn't have strings attached to it, right? There's not all these strings attached. You don't have to get, an acupuncture license to do it in a lot of places. That can be you, which is great. And we need to expand those laws everywhere. But it's on the ground. You're able to do it. With all of the social justice movements happening right now, there is such great need for supporting folks as they witness a lot of the traumas happening, as they witness justice being stripped away in a lot of spaces, so that they can go back out there and keep doing good. And that's how I see a lot of what I do. Is I'm a support person. I've been a medic, a street medic before, and I'm a trained street medic. And my job is not to necessarily be part of it, but to be an adjunct. It's to be and hold space and help people go back out there, help people go back out there and not be harmed. help people go out there and be safe. Does that make sense to all of you?
It's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. And I think that I love it that we're talking about the decolonization, and that's exactly where we need to start.
Absolutely.
We need to start just exactly at that point. And I think that NADA, all of us are doing the best we can. We're the best we can be. And we're getting better all the time because we come together and we share, and we in the spirit of NADA is going on and on. And I wanted to suggest that we got to take care of ourselves, and we also have to have some real committed reasons for what we're doing. And I wanted to suggest that this book is written by Angela Davis' sister, Fania E. Davis. And she is a PhD in Indigenous Studies and a lawyer. And it goes into the whole history, so that when we're talking about decolonization, we have a lot of good authority. And we have, it's like $5, this book. It's wonderful. But I think we have to take care of ourselves too. And somewhere along the line, we have to remember that we're the ones that need to lie down on the floor and put the cloth over our eyes,
yeah,
and meditate and say how good we are, and how and I'll tell you, I think from today on, this has been our circle, just like the like the rocks and the stones. We have this circle, and I can see all of you in the circle, and it's so magnificent.
Yeah, we need to remember and honor that that NADA came out of the Black and Brown people in the community in Harlem, in the Bronx, that this was started to help the community heal itself. And so that's our foundation, and that's what we need to continue to go forward with, that essence that what we are doing is saving and healing and loving our own communities. And that's what's going to save us. You know, the medical system is not going to save us, and none of that is going to save us. We are going to heal and save ourselves, and NADA is a huge part of that. So we, as Sheila said, we have to heal ourselves with NADA, and then that just becomes literally and figuratively the spirit of NADA as we continue to heal and support and love each other from all walks of life.
Right. Yvette, would you like to talk a little bit about the NADA history? Because that was what was supposed to be talked about in this discussion. Do you want to talk about, for those that aren't familiar with the roots of NADA? That would be great.
Yeah, I will talk a little bit about, I have to get off in like 5 minutes just to get on another call. But so the history of NADA is, and Sheila can certainly pipe right in. So in the 70s, in the late 70s, early 80s, there was a heroin epidemic, which I call the real epidemic, the first epidemic, and so in the African-American community and in New York in the Bronx. And so Lincoln Hospital was the treatment center for that community, which was mostly African-American and Brown and people, and Caribbean people. So the community, the people in the community did not want to have methadone as the treatment to get off of heroin, because it was just substituting one drug for another. So they wanted a non-medical therapy. And so the Young Lords and the Black Panthers and other, social activists in the community learned how to do acupuncture. And, there were some Chinese people involved as well, showing the benefits of acupuncture. And then they went to Canada and learned how to do acupuncture, and then specifically learned that this type of auricular acupuncture really was most helpful and it was most accessible. So they brought that back to the community at Lincoln Hospital and started using this protocol. There is such a beautiful history around this, and you can go to the NADA website, and there's a link on the NADA website that explains the Lincoln story. And so the Lincoln story sort of gets lost now because of the narrative that we currently use. But there is a movement to really bring that narrative and the experience of the Black and the Brown community and the activists, into full view as to the foundation of NADA. But please take an opportunity to go to the website and learn more about Lincoln. And the Lincoln Center, which now doesn't exist anymore. I think it was closed several years ago, but the spirit of NADA is still there. I assure you, it is still there. So thank you so much, Stephanie, for letting me give you that Reader's Digest condensed version of the story. But it is such a beautiful story. So thank you.
And there's some wonderful, there's some wonderful YouTube videos about that. I don't know if you've seen those, but I'm going to put those in the links for everybody to watch. And there are also some really great articles that I'm searching for right now that I am going to add to the link, because the clinic that I started, we always show gratitude and thanks because of the inspiration that we got to do this from the Black Panthers and the Young Lords and the Lincoln Detox Center. So
there is one of those original people from there that unfortunately continues to be incarcerated, even though he is.
Thank you.
So props to Dr. Mutulu Shakur, and any help to get him out of prison on a compassionate release would be an awesome help.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have definitely been working on that to have Mutulu Shakur released on a compassionate basis. So we are working on that, and we are sending the spirit of NADA out there in the universe with our intention to get him out of prison.
Right. And Dr. Ken Carter is working that as well.
Yay, Kenny.
Pardon?
Yay, Kenny.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, the spirit of NADA, as we're talking about, is that we're all planting the seeds. We're all in it together. Where seeds are coming out all over, and I love it that I can look at you. You look like you're the stars of the hemisphere, and that's we are all stars in the hemisphere. We are.
In the vein of that, I put a link to a campaign for the compassionate release that you can all sign of Mutulu Shakur. So there's a link in there. There is a organized petition that everyone, it always helps for people to sign. I put that in the chat.
There I am. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, so one of the struggles that I deal with is because being a First Nation people, like this is not like traditional, or this is not native, there's always that excuse. So it was like the first time I had treatment, I think I was 19. So I saw the benefits then, 18, 19, at IHS when Phyllis gave me a treatment. And I remembered her, so it's kind of awesome how the everything has come full circle. So here I am, and over the years, I did acupuncture with Cope Community Service for the homeless population. They would give you a treatment and then you get a bus pass. So there was an incentive for going there. So what I deal with like at work is like trying to convince these grown men to participate in something that is altruistic, is not masculine, quote unquote, or the excuse is that I don't like needles, because most of the clients that we do have a few, I'd say 1/3 of the clients who are opiate users, so they don't really like using needles because of they're being triggered. So it's just constantly engaging with people and trying to get my coworkers to do it. It's trying to get them to do it. And Sue Tham is the one who trained me. She told me once, like, you need to get your certificate and hang it up, because then it'll remind you to keep doing it. So that's where like my struggle is at, like trying to convince these non-believers that that this is beneficial, this is going to help you in your recovery, and it'll help you to meditate, and especially that they're men. It's not women. I don't work with a female population. I work with a male population.
Thank you for sharing that. I think it's great that I don't know, everyone is sharing their struggles. I did share some, but also their joys and their successes with getting this out there. So thank you, Warren, for sharing all of that. Because it's not all easy. We don't always just go into situations and people are just like, yeah, let's just stick needles in us, because, you know, as you all know, immediately there's a lot more people that panic when you suggest that you try to do NADA sometimes. And getting into the door of places and getting past that barrier, which is where seeds are really useful. Seeds are a really good gateway to the needles, and super helpful, especially when you're trying to get in and do acts of social justice and you have this to offer, but people aren't familiar with it and people may not be open to it. What ways have you all used to get the road in, to get access to be able to provide service in settings? And if you want to share, you can just put it into the chat and Sunahai can unmute you.
So we've been going into recovery centers in Manchester, New Hampshire. Elizabeth Ropp started doing that about 2.5 years ago. And the first time she was there, one person wanted a treatment. She went every Tuesday until COVID shut them down. But she was getting to the point where she was having 30 treatments in her 2-hour visit there. She was needing to bring in other ADSs to help her just because people were seeing it. And for her, it was being there every week, showing up, being faithful. I'm always here. This is always available. And the people in the recovery center didn't really like the kind of like, okay, well, let's all spread out and go sit in separate corners and be very quiet and have a relaxed treatment. That's not what they were into. They wanted to be together and talk and laugh and have joy. They got the same treatment, having joy that they would get having peace. Hopefully they had peace as well. But I thought that was amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just notified that we are at time. I don't know how we're going to get everyone back into the same room. I don't have control over any of that.
Well, we're the boss room, so
we're the best room, obviously. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, our social justice conversation.
I'm sorry.
Was cut short.
Can you close all the rooms? I think we need to.
Yeah, except Anthony really wanted to say something because I was hoping to give him like a minute. I'll give you.
Take a minute for people to come back. So why don't you close the rooms and Anthony can share?
Yeah.
Okay, Anthony. Okay.
Very good idea, Mary.
Good. Doing it right now.
Yeah. Okay.
Plus, Mary needs to go to bed.
7 seconds, Anthony. Hurry up. Where is he?
Anthony. Yeah, he's.
Anthony.
I unmuted him.
Yep.
There he is.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hurry up.
So how we've overcome that barrier is during our intakes, we will always promote it. So we would sell how effective the treatment is, and then I would role model. So one of the providers will ask me when we're in a group setting in front of the soldiers if I would like a treatment, and I always say yes. And the ones that don't get a treatment still stay in there and they practice mindfulness, and then the soldiers will sell it themselves when they start expressing how effective it is. And then that encourages them to want to do it. So I have them sell it.
Right, that's perfect. That's perfect, Anthony. That's absolutely perfect. Being models and, people watching, I think that's the great thing about the community spaces too, is when you're in a community space and not everyone has to participate, like you said, Anthony. Some people can just watch, and then seeing that you're okay and that, it's good for you makes it open for other people to maybe try the next time.
Exactly.
Thank you for sharing, Anthony. So I was forgetting that we have been our own breakout room, which is the main